Hey everybody, Aaron Count Stage Dynamics, and this is the Valhalla Tactical Rukh offset red dot mount. Rukh. I don't have a Norseman to help me with the pronunciation, so I apologize if I pronounced it wrong. But what we're talking about is an offset red dot mount, 45 degree, or maybe whatever degree you really want within reason, because it's adjustable. This is probably one of the most versatile mounts I've seen yet, and I've been using it for quite some time. They sent it out to me just to kind of get my impressions on it, and I've been using it ever since on a number of different guns. So this isn't a 2,000 round review, it's a 2,000 plus round review, because at this point I've got over 5,000 rounds on 3 different guns on this mount combined. So there's a couple of burn downs in there and a whole bunch of drop tests, but we'll get to that. First, let's talk about, well, what we're talking about. It's an offset 45 degree with an asterisk mount because it is adjustable. I can do 42 degrees, I can do 46 degrees, I can do damn near 90 degrees on a very low profile 1.93 height mount, which is available with multiple footprints. And in the RMR's sake, one of the first things cool to talk about is the battery compartment is underneath accessible. You can put 2 batteries in there, one to actually charge the optic and the other one to kind of serve as a spacer and as a spare battery when the battery that's in it dies 2 or 3 years down the road, depending on if you turn it off or leave it on when you store the rifle. All in a very low profile. When I mean low profile, what I'm talking about is the actual mounting surface itself, where it interacts with the 12 o'clock rail, will fit under a lot of different scope mounts that are out there. So your priority of placement is a little bit more generous than some of the other beefier or less machined mounts that exist for this particular, well, use. There's a healthy debate on whether your backup optic should be mounted 45 degree offset or piggyback or inline. This video isn't about that. So this video is going to be more interesting to people who are more likely to mount on that offset, that 45 degree asterisk, at least in regards to this mount, versus the piggyback. So we're not really talking about that. I do have a preference, and if you've noticed, my preference is offset versus piggyback. And I can do a video on that in the future. We're just talking about this particular optic mount in itself. When I first got it, I was a little apprehensive because of the fact that it can be manipulated, it can be adjusted for angle. I was worried that under use, not even hard use, but use and definitely drop tests, I could experience a loss of 0 because the mount would be able to move. And just right up front, that did happen when I first mounted it. The very first rifle I mounted it on, I did have an adjustment take place without my desire or input. However, I believe that was operator error, user error, installation error, because when I reinstalled it and torqued it to spec, it did not happen again for the time that the mount spent on that rifle. So there's a little bit of worry there, but that's kind of going to be up to the user to make sure it's properly installed to manufacturer specifications, manufacturer specified torque, so that wouldn't happen, because it didn't happen again on the other rifles I use it on. It's right now mounted on my Bren 2, and it's been great. Before that, I had it mounted on a Lantac. I also had it mounted on a 308. Recoil wasn't an issue whatsoever. Now, because this isn't a traditional review, it went through 2 burn downs. So not just one 500 round burn down, I went to 2 500 round burn downs. So there's 1,000 rounds right there. And it also spent the entirety of reviews of other things on 2,000 round reviews. So I've got over 5,000 rounds combined on the mount itself. However, I know some people are particular about that. So the burn down in general, the whole purpose of the burn down is to show, well, what could potentially happen with a frequency of fire. So 500 rounds in 3 or 4 minutes versus 500 rounds over 3 or 4 weeks or months or whatever. So just to get it out of the way, here is one of the burn downs that the optic mount went through during the review process. Definitely no issues there. Now, I did mention it had been mounted on multiple guns through multiple reviews, so there were plenty of drop tests. Now, I zeroed it for 25 yards. I feel like that's a pretty reasonable zero distance for an offset optic that serves as a backup sighting system or an emergency sighting system. Or, well, emergency works, because if I'm dialed out to 8 and I suddenly need to take a shot much closer than that, then it was unexpected. I didn't have time to dial back to 1. I would consider that to be an emergency use. So 25 yards is a pretty respectable zero, especially on most optics that are going to fit this footprint. Most are going to be 1 MOA adjustments. So getting them zeroed at 50 or 100 would be somewhat problematic. Not impossible by any means. However, not ideal for the particular optic we're talking about. So 25, I know my holdovers at 25. I know my data at 25, so I'm not worried about it. Even though the rifle's main optic is zeroed for 100, I can make that mental switch. It's not that big of a deal. So that's exactly what I was doing. Here's a 5-round group I fired before a series of drop tests. This was basically a zero confirmation group. And then here's some drop tests. Good bounce. And another 5-round group fired after that final drop test. That was just one zero check on one rifle. Like I said, it rode multiple rifles throughout the time I've had it before I was actually able, or I was in a position to make the video. I wanted to do just a strict 2,000 round review video on it. However, time got away from me. I got focused on other things, so I wasn't able to do that. But you as a viewer have a little bit added benefit in the fact that this thing has been on multiple rifles for multiple calibers for much longer than that standard 2,000 round review. I've had it for the better half of a year now, and I've been very, very impressed with it. In fact, I've already purchased a second one. I like it a lot. I think the versatility it offers is great because I don't get married to that hard 45-degree angle. Even at the 1.93 height, I might have a scope turret that doesn't clear properly. And being able to adjust for that, or I might have a scope turret that sits so close to the body of the optic, it just kind of hangs out there, and I want to bring it in as close as possible. The big asterisk, or the big caveat, I should say, to zeroing optics like this is to make sure that the rifle is on the same plane. Bore axis to optic as level as horizontal as possible when you're zeroing them. In fact, if you dig deep in the channel, I've done a video specifically on how I do zero my offset optics. They applies more to 45, this one being able to be adjusted if you're knocking it into like 36 degree or 52 degree or whatever it happens to be. Zeroing can be a little bit more problematic, but almost everybody with an equilibrium understands how a horizon works. So it wouldn't be too difficult, and I can tell you from my experience, it's not too difficult to bag the gun down on a soft bag, get it horizontal, get it zeroed, especially at 25. At 50 or 100, it would be a little bit more challenging, depending on the shooter, the optic, the dot size, the adjustment availability, so on and so forth. But it's not really as problematic as some people make it out to be. Zeroing these things is pretty straightforward. If you understand the zeroing process, you wouldn't have a problem. The big thing, like I said, is to make sure this thing is torqued to spec, and then occasionally check it, make sure you're witness marking your screws, making sure that you're not having any shift, and occasionally check your zeros like you should with any one. So is this the optic mount? I like it. I like it a lot. I like it so much I bought another one. I didn't buy the first one, just for full disclosure. I kind of already mentioned that they sent it to me, but I did then purchase an additional one because I have more than one rifle with a magnified optic on it. And I plan on getting a third just because it fills a niche that really, well, it does what I want it to do, and it gives me more versatility than I'm going to get from some of the other mounts. It doesn't mean there aren't other quality mounts out there, because there certainly are, but there's very few that provide the same versatility this one does, especially if your offset optic is going to be an RMR and it's got that very problematic, antiquated bottom battery access. Don't get me wrong, very great optic. In fact, it's one of the optics that kind of sits at the gold standard of reliability and durability. But the bottom access battery compartment has always been somewhat problematic when it comes to mounting, taking it off, re-zeroing, things like that. Now I don't have to do that. I can take that battery compartment off, change the battery out. I don't lose my zero, which I did confirm because I had it long enough that the battery in this particular RMR did die. And I did a quick swap just to, check it out, put the gun back on, or put the battery cap back on. Next time I went to the range, check the zero. I didn't expect it to lose zero, but hey, you want to check anyway. Verify before you trust. So I would highly recommend this mount, especially if you're looking for a 45-degree offset that isn't 45 degrees unless you want it to be. It can be adjustable based on ride position you need in relationship to the optic and the height that you want, and there's multiple footprints available. You should definitely check those out. I can't wait for them to do a footprint for like a Holosun 509T. Really looking forward to that because, well, I'd like to have that option as well. I'm Eric Count with Sage Dynamics. Train accordingly.